This morning's readings are taken from Exodus chapter 20, verse 12, which is on page 78 in the Pew Bibles, and Mark chapter 3, verses 31 to 35, and that may be found on page 1005. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. And now to Mark's reading. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and my brothers?" he asked. When he looked at those seated in a circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to look at how to keep the peace with our parents. Parenting can be hard and challenging work, as many of us know. A harassed woman was busy getting her 3 young children to school. Her friend who saw her struggling asked her, "If you could have your time over again, would you really do this? Would you have children?" "Oh, yes," was the reply. "Really?" said her friend. "Yes, but not these 3. So if you have the next slide, please. So this is where I'm going with the talk today. So first of all, follow the Maker's instructions and honour our parents. Secondly, give proper attention to parenting from the beginning. And thirdly, accept God's invitation to join his family, which was the second part of the reading that we had. So the first part then, next slide, please. So follow the Maker's instructions and honour our parents. So this is the 5th commandment, to honour our father and our mother. And this, in fact, is the foundation of the ones that follow it. We've been coming backwards, which is rather unusual. I'm sure J. John has his reasons, but this is the foundation for all that follows it that we've just had so far. So honouring father and mother helps us to love our neighbour as ourselves. So there are 2 aspects of it, are there not, when we're up to 18 or so growing up. And I'm grateful that I was already a Christian in that time and so knew this instruction. And today, not many people probably would know this instruction. And then as an adult, move on 30 years, then when we have parents who are elderly and needing support, we need to honour our parents in a different way when we get to that stage. So I had a discussion with somebody and thought quite hard about what we mean by honouring. We don't seem to use that much today. And tell me if you got a better thought afterwards. But I came down with the idea that to honour somebody was to respect them for their position and authority. So that's what I thought it probably was aware. But I was also aware, and it was pointed out to me, that we may not respect them for their behaviour towards us. So think about this. So this commandment is the only one with a promise attached to it, that you may live long in the land, which sounds like a good thing. So living in a relationship in a family helps us to mature as a person. Family is a place of belonging, respect, loving and learning. We learn to have somebody in authority over us which we'll have in society when we've grown up and get a job and so on. In the Bible, this was taken very seriously. If you look in Deuteronomy 21, verse 18, it talks about stoning to death a rebellious son. I'm not sure how social services look on that today, but there we go. So the New Testament also reinforces the idea of honouring parents. Ephesians 6:1 says, "Honour your father and mother." And if you remember Jesus, who was found, he was not with his parents, they went back to look for him, and he was in the temple speaking to the learned people. But afterwards he went away and was subject to them, to their authority, submitted to their authority back at home. So Jesus did it, and so should we. George Washington, interestingly, the first USA president, said this: "All I am, I owe to my mother. I attribute all my success in life to the moral, the intellectual and physical education I received from her." So what does it look like to honour parents? So we learn to respect their authority, which helps us later on when we're under some boss or other working or whatever. We learn to be obedient to them. Sometimes we have to be obedient to others. We learn to say sorry when we've messed up, apologize for what we've done wrong. And we become thankful to parents for their caring for us and for providing for us. And I remember many sacrifices when I was being brought up. And we learn to get on with siblings and so on. We'll come back to that a little bit later. And so that's a help for the rest of life, learning to get on with people. It can be difficult growing up, though. This is what Mark Twain once said. "When I was 14 years old, my father was so ignorant, I hated to have the old man around. But when I was 21, I was astonished how much the old man had learned in such a short time." 30 years, as I said earlier on, from childhood, parents need help and assistance. And that was certainly the case in my situation. And all through all of this, fortunately, I was blessed to be a Christian early on. So I was always looking for God's help with all this. And I want to share a particular thing with you now, a personal story of God's help for me at a time when my mother was reaching the end of her life. And she'd gone into hospital, and we'd 180 miles away in Rotherham, and I was working and pressed with work, of course, so we went up at the weekends and so on to see her, because that's all we were able to do. And then I was prompted by God, to go there in the middle of the week. So I went up there and I arrived and found that she was actually dying. So I felt very blessed to be there with her, to hold her hand, to say thank you for all she'd done, and to hum some of her favourite hymn tunes. We had some family tunes that we all liked, and I was able to do that, and I did other stuff. But without God as guidance and assistance, I would not have been there. Can I have the next slide, please? So if children are going to go up and obey their parents, honour their parents, they're going to need good parenting from the beginning. So we start with limited knowledge of parenting. We learn from our own parents, and I've learnt from one particular big mistake of one of my parents, but I'm sure I've made a wonderful mistake all of my own, which my children will tell me about someday, maybe. So our aim is to give our children roots of responsibility and wings of independence. So there are many behavioural traps to be avoided, and if as we do, we've studied the Old Testament quite a bit. If you look there, you see terrible problems of favouritism and unfairness. So you remember how Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob, and she encouraged her brother Jacob to cheat his brother. You remember that had lasting consequences that were never properly resolved. You remember Eli the priest, who had two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who were wicked sons and did not regard the Lord at all. And in the Bible, it tells us how Eli challenged them, but it seems that he was on the case too late. So I was blessed by my parents in many ways. My mother particularly had a saying she told me often, which is really, do as you will be done by, which translated from the Yorkshire means love your neighbour as yourself. And I saw that played out in what she said and how she did that in her life. And when people rocked up at the door wanting food, she would always give people, whoever they were. You might not do that today because you don't know who's coming with and what they're going to do, but there we go. And both my parents encouraged me to go to church, where I came to know and love God. It gave me that opportunity. So bringing children along to church gives an opportunity. The nuns in the Catholic school would have had the same objective. The children were lined up in the cafeteria to get lunch. At the head of the table was a large pile of apples. A nun had wrote a note, and on it put, "Take only one, God is watching." Further along the table was a large pile of chocolate chip cookies. A child had written, "Take all you want, God is watching the apples." Now we need to start with discipline and training early in a child's life. You'll be familiar with the Proverbs verse, Proverbs 22. Train children in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will continue in it. They won't turn from it. So if we don't start early, it gets harder later on, and with Hophni and Phinehas, it may become impossible. Now, I think life is more difficult for young people today than it was certainly when I was growing up. So we need to show them lots of love, lots of acceptance and encouragement. I'm not involved with doing that with my children now, though I suppose I am a bit, but I'm more involved with doing that with the grandchildren now. So both parents often have to work now, so they have less time that they can give to children. That's life today. Family breakdown has occurred, and sometimes you have a single-parent family, or there may be a new parent, a new mother or a new father. Young people are obsessed with these mobile phones now and may see very unsuitable material. Some parents don't even, there was an article in the paper last week about parents not even preparing their child to be ready to go to primary school. They didn't know what a book was. So if you gave them a book, they'd start flicking it as if they were doing their iPad, and they were not trained to use the toilet and all that sort of stuff. Parents have just gone AWOL with it all. There are many seriously flawed authority figures in life today. And there's a big rise in mental health issues. I don't remember these at all when I was growing up, but fortunately Engage are on the case with this, who we support, and BC Ole, who is the worker who does this. In fact, there's going to be a conference coming up later in the month. If anybody wants to, has got a particular interest in this mental health for children, Care for the Family are doing something. I can tell you afterwards about it. So parents may be so busy that they have little time for children. Socrates, 400 BC, not the Brazilian footballer, who some of you will remember, said this: Why fellow citizens, do you make every effort to make greater wealth, but take so little care of your children, to whom one day you must relinquish all? Children need guidance and correction. Discipline should start early and be explained and administered in love without causing physical harm or crushing a child's spirit. A sweet little girl was being scolded by her mother for pulling her sister's hair. The mother said, "It must have been Satan who put you up to this." "Maybe," she said, "but kicking her in the ankles was my idea." So time is a precious commodity. That's something that time and attention that parents need to give. I shared a story at the beginning, and I'll share another one. I was confronted by the time issue myself in work. After 15 years working for Shell, the last 6 of which were in London, and I headed a team of technical specialists looking after North Sea integrity. Suddenly the company announced that they were moving us to Aberdeen, and our children were in secondary education, so we could not move them, and so I had to go on my own. And anyone who's been faced with this knows that's a very hard situation. So where was Dad Monday to Friday? Dad was AWOL doing the job. So obviously I realized that this was no way forward for my children and my wife, and so I looked for another job. And it took a long time to sort something else, get another job back down in London. But basically, I poured 15 years of my life into this career, and I've become a very good position in the company. And I wasn't forced, I could have carried on, but I deemed it important to stop and come back and join my family. It took some months to get another job, but God graced me out and got me a job with BP that I never applied for. They'd heard that I was available, and I had 5 years oil refinery experience, and that sorted it out. My team thought I was crazy leaving, but I thought they were crazy staying. Okay, third and final section then. So, accept God's invitation to join his family. So we're used to being in families, and unfortunately, as time goes on, our parents are no longer with us, and sometimes our siblings are not close. I have a sister. She lives a long way up in the Sheffield area, so we are not into seeing each other very much, though we do talk on the telephone. But God offers us membership of another family, his family, and access comes through faith in Jesus and obedience to him. The verse on there, whoever does God's will is my mother and father and sister. I'm not quite sure what's happened there. Anyway, to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. And you may remember Jesus himself in our readings spoke of this and said, whoever does God's will is my brother, sister, and mother. God's family has open arms to welcome people in. And we've heard about racial justice Sunday. One of my favourite hymns is All Are Welcome in This Place. Let us build a house where love can dwell and all can safely live. A place where saints and children tell our hearts learn to forgive. Built of hopes and dreams and visions, rock of faith and vault of grace. Here the love of Christ shall end divisions. All are welcome, all are welcome. All are welcome in this place. Dwight Moody, a famous preacher, said that attending church is as vital to a disciple as a transfusion of healthy blood to a sick person. So church is a place of belonging and blessing. And Ruth and I have been blessed by churches we've been to. So when we arrived here in Woking, this was the 6th place we had lived in 15 years. It's not as bad as it sounds. The first one was we were just leaving, and the last one we're just arriving at. But we moved a lot, and we got great blessing from God's people in each place that we were, and we kept in touch with many of them. And we had a special heart for Hereford, where we were there, and I learnt in my 20s so much from an old lady, Mrs. Martin, who was in her 80s. And the young can learn from the old, and I learned very valuable lessons from her. And we were invited back there for the 950th anniversary last year, 50 years from when we'd been there. I want to close now, but I want to close with a poem written by a person who came here and loved this place. So the guy's name was Simon Harrison, you'll know, and it's if he's up there on the little banner. But God inspired this man. Such a place this is, where man meets God and sings his praises, where young and old are both at home and play their part, where proud new mums bring babes for doting and fears for calming, where cocky kids can teach their elders and yet learn grace. Such a place this is, where broken hearts find healing and the downtrodden are lifted up, where those who are told they can't now find they can and teach others how, where the tuneless sing like angels when God is in their hearts, and the sad are wrapped in arms that fear no tears. Such a place this is, filled with the blessed and the blessing, the cared for and the caring, the annoyed and the annoying, the frustrated and the frustrating, the imperfect and the sinful, and yet the smiling Saviour looks down on it all and makes it right, and makes it right. So such a place this is. Thank you, Simon Harrison, and thank you, Lord, for inspiring him. What does this place mean to you, I wonder?